Max Gorlin, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell from the Hawthorn Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Well, my friends, you have made it through your 2021 fantasy footy season. Hello, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well, and this is the final podcast from us focusing on the 2021 fantasy footy season. And wow, if you've been joining us over these past 8 and a bit months, gosh, it has been a while since I launched out the 50 most relevant, but it is so good to be spending time with you. And on this episode, I got Jordox back. Hello, buddy. How you doing, man?
I'm good, mate. I'm a bit sad because after this week, it's all over. The fantasy season is over, and it's been a season of ups and downs. And I know I'm going to miss it the second it's gone.
The good news is, Jordox, is there's a month of footy that those us get to keep an eye on and not have any fantasy stress in the back of our eyes. Then, let's be honest, if you listen to the Coaches Panel, you're probably more on the slightly obsessive compulsive or very much in love with your fantasy footy. You're listening to all of the trade conversations that are out there and looking through all the details, the minutiae of what does this mean for my club and breakout guys on how does this affect premiums. The good news is for Patreons, I'm going to do all that work for you during the off season, where you'll get an article of every single player that moves, delisted free agents, trades, and also your restricted and unrestricted free agents. You get my take on what it means for the club they come to, the club they're leaving, and their fantasy relevance in 2022. Oh, yes, I just said that phrase, 2022. But on this episode, we want to do a couple of things. One, in a moment, we want to kind of look at our annual club by club 2021 Fantasy Footy Awards. We'll rush through them because there are 18 clubs, but we want to make sure we do that. But Jordox, let's be honest, there's kind of two real excited groups of fantasy coaches at the moment. Those that are in a genuine race for either a personal best rankings and or getting a prize of some form, whether it be the number one overall ranking or winning some form of a top 100 like I had in AFL Fantasy, or some cash prizes in Dream Team and SuperCoach. Or you've got those that are league focused and it's about their grand final, again, whether it's draft or classic formats of the game. So you're probably of all of us on the panel, the most in love with your leagues. Actually, Fox might rival you on that one, to be fair. But I know you're in the grand final in one of your matchups. Without giving too much away of what you're doing, let's talk about the psychology to help coaches that are league focused. What are the two, maybe top 2 or 3 things that coaches heading into a league focus of the final round, what's your top bits of advice for?
Yes, it's a nerve-wracking week for some. And look, I'd say don't deviate too much from what you've been doing that got you there in the first place. Treat it as just another week, as they say. But look, it's such a different game, the fantasy games, from what it was years ago with the rolling lockouts and all the little tricks that you can do. So I guess plan, have a good look at the fixture, have an idea, what loopholes you can do, when you can do them, and have a plan to go for it on the weekend. You don't want the weekend to come and life gets in the way and you haven't planned and something happens and you lose the cup for it. So probably just plan and just enjoy it. It's so hard to get there, so hard, depending on how tough your comps are and your leagues that you're in. But I know the ones that I'm in, they're so hard. So I'm just enjoying the week. The grand final parade on Friday's been canned because of COVID.
Within the 5Ks.
Yeah, it's going to be within the 5Ks. But yeah, look, nothing more than that, really. Just back yourself. Whatever you've done throughout the year has got you to this spot.
Yeah, I think the 2 key things for me would be keep an eye on the fixture and the teams that come through. Like an example is Fremantle. Right now, they're only out of the finals top 8 on percentage. They play Sunday, first game on Sunday, but by then, if it'll be them v Essendon like fighting for that 8th spot. And West Coast have a pretty reasonable percentage jump, at least on Fremantle. West Coast win, it's going to be really, really difficult for Fremantle to make it. So those are the kind of factors. There are going to be teams that do play a conservative approach with this final round because we no longer have the week off next week heading into finals. So a team that can pretty much not move, like Brisbane and Sydney, they don't move in terms of they'll get a home qualifying final, unless, of course, something drastic happens above them with Bulldogs Port or whatever. But we'll know those pictures as the week goes on. So that's why I say keep an eye on the fixture and keep an eye on the results. We may see teams go, you know what, we're putting a Q and a rack in this game. It's not going to impact our ladder positioning. It's not going to impact our finals. We're just going to get a guy through fit and healthy. So keep an eye on that. And then the other thing I'd say for a league focus would be, do you feel like you're in a favorite or a not? Because if you're a favorite and you've got trades available, then you could start to play some defensive moves and combat that guy in the opposition lineup that you're worried about. Conversely, the opposite. If you need to take some risks, maybe you don't go, a popular captaincy combination this week might be a Mitchell into a Steele, for example. You know what? Maybe you go, look, I'm going to put the VC on McRae Friday night. It's a bit more of a risk, but he's got the potential to give me a 135, 140. And so those are the things you do is risk it if you need to, but also if you're pretty comfortable that he or she that you're playing as your lineup against you's got to pull something out of the bag, counter that. And like you said, it's good advice, Jordox, too. Like, we've got loopholes now. We can play some defensive moves. We can do all these things. So there's plenty there. And those for rankings, I think the advice is pretty similar. If you're trying to hold into a ranking position, you're probably being defensive. If you're trying to make up ground, you're probably looking to get aggressive. And that's just got to be the way that you choose to play the game. And I think we'll get some carnage on Thursday night with team selections, and those that have depth and trades will be rewarded for those.
Probably carnage throughout the weekend too, as you touched on with clubs and where their position on the ladder is, and the removal of that pre-finals bye, that really is a bit of a game changer, and that was my thought when they announced it, what would Thursday night look like. But it could be throughout the weekend we see players pulled. So have cover, make sure you've got your cover, because it could be one of those weekends.
It could be, but look, hopefully from your sake, everything goes your way, and into 2021, you raise yourself your Premiership Cup in your league, or you just finish off a great year from a rankings perspective. And if your year is just done and you don't care, just make a trade that you just love doing. Pick players you love watching for one last week. Just enjoy it. That's for sure. Let's head into our club by club look at the year. Retrospective look. Our Patreons got an article that landed just the other day from me where it was looking back at the moves that made your 2021 season. Things like bringing in Darcy Parish at round 6, season-breaking, making decision, trading at round 2, and in a suspended Patrick Dangerfield to a Jack Zeeble. That would have made your season. Trading an injured Josh Dunkley to a Dane Zorko, moving an injured Brodie Grundy to a Sean Darcy in a couple of formats. These are just some of the moves, and you can go and check them out now at our any tier level at coachespanel.tv for our Patreons. But what we are doing for every single person on this episode is looking back retrospectively at the year, club by club. We'll take it in turns and work our way through, Jordox, I suppose. We'll put an article up on this too at coachespanel.tv before the round gets underway. But what I want to do is look at the club fantasy footy MVP for the year. Who's the guy that, look, some of them are really fantasy relevant. Others are like, well, you've been pretty good. But for the most part, the top of the tier MVP should be someone that's pretty relevant this year. The cash cow, the guy that made you the money, that was valuable, that delivered for you this year. And then I know it's not really 2021 relevant, but who's someone from the club that you got a sneaky little eye on? It's going to be a track watch for you heading into 2022. So maybe Jordox will hand your crows over. This is a Schonberg-free list. Actually, it'd be a decent track watch in 2022, to be fair. But what do you got?
Track watch or MVP?
Oh, get off the grass.
Yeah, MVP is an easy one in Adelaide. Rory Laird has had an incredible season. His last season as a defender in our teams,
Yes.
I must say, I don't think he's gotten the kudos that he's probably deserved, if I'm honest, in the AFL world and in the fantasy world. I mean, he's been a gun defender in fantasy for years, but
Yeah.
he's a pure on baller, and he's taken his game to another level. So yeah,
He's been
it's been
awesome.
great. It's been great watching him. The cash cow was right from the start. Little Jimmy Rowe, James
good
Rowe.
shout.
He would have played. I'm not sure. I reckon nearly the first dozen games of
Yeah,
the
it's pretty
year
much
before
right
he
up
had
to
a
the
break,
bye, wasn't
possibly.
it? Yeah.
And he was one of those ones where he was never going to be scoring much, but he was just chipping away, making cash. And I'm pretty sure when I finally moved him on, he had his best score of the year. So that always happens. And a notable mention would be Geordie Butts.
Yeah, he's been
great
good.
name,
Sammy
by the
Berry,
way.
he's been good too. Yeah.
And last name. So yeah, it's been a few at Crowland, and then track watch for 2022. The ball magnet Matty Crouch. Unfortunately,
nice.
didn't get on the park this year at all.
Max
which
discount
is,
coming his way.
Unfortunate for Crows fans, but very good for us fantasy fans because he will be cheap next year. The only thing is, will he be at the same club?
Well,
Either way, put him on your watch list.
Yeah, I think that's a good shout, man. I like all of those calls. Let's go to Brisbane. I could have given the MVP to one or two players, let's be honest. Rich was never really in contention for me. Zorko has been probably the most safe forward premium for us in a pretty topsy-turvy forward premium season. But I just find it so hard to not give it to Jared Lyons. Like 117 average in SuperCoach, 116 in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team. I thought at the start of the year he'd just be that 105-ish guy and not really have ceiling. Man, was I wrong. Like, he's just put teams to the sword. He's been relatively unique. He's been a difference maker for coaches in 2021. And so for me, he's the MVP. We didn't get a heap of cash cows from Brisbane, but we did get a really important mid-forward one in Devon Robertson. They lost a couple of bodies through the midfield. He spent some time forward, but there was a critical 6 to 8 runner games that he had sort of in that middle third of the season where he was safe to put on field most weeks for a 50, 60, 70. You'd get the odd score that would pop as well. And he was just so important through that kind of second trimester of your season this year. He was absolutely sensational, and coaches that jumped on him, especially once injuries started to hit through that midfield unit, he really became important. And then for a track watch, a guy I know he burnt a lot of people this year, but Lockie Neal, those injuries has really hurt him right from the beginning of the preseason. He was battling in injuries. He has had every injury under the sun mid-season. He's going to be priced drastically low in contrast to what we had to pay for at the start of the year. If he has an injury-free preseason, I'm a big Neal fan in SuperCoach, maybe not the others, but I think he's an absolute legit watch list across the formats next year because he's going to be so much cheaper than what we started with.
And he finally showed us on the weekend, didn't he?
Yeah.
120 in Fantasy and Dream Team, and not sure we did SuperCoach, but absolutely, he's had one of those years. He'll be much better and very nice price. Moving on to Carlton, been an interesting year for the Blue Baggers. But the one thing that would keep a smile on all Carlton fans' faces is the performance of Sam Walsh. So he is their MVP by a country mile. He's just a joy to watch, isn't he? So yeah, there's not much more that could be said other than he's only just starting his career, really. So he's going to be one we're enjoying watching for the next 10, 15 years. Cash cow is Matthew Owies.
Oh, yeah. Nice little late season flyer, yeah.
Yeah, he's come in at a good time too, just obviously with the great Eddie Betts announcing his retirement. Owies was really good. He had an impact, and he came in later in the year. So if you jumped on him maybe around the buyers possibly, good cash generation and a
nice.
good option for your bench. And then Track Watch, I want to give a special mention to Nick Newman. I
yes.
think he could still be really something. He's going to be 29 next year though. So, but no, the one for Carlton is a guy who came across on big money and had, I would say, arguably one of the worst debut years, and that's Zach Williams.
Oh,
and they're not hanging the bloke. It's just, he had injuries. He got suspended twice. I think.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, if you had him in any format, he
was a
would have
headache.
been, you would have pulled your hair out. But the good thing is, particularly for those that didn't jump on him, he'll be very nicely priced.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to work his butt off in the off season, and I'm sure he will. And I think they still have plans to make him a midfielder, and he will be a gun. So if he gets going, his price is very nice.
Yeah, don't mind that shout at all from you. For Collingwood, the MVP's got to be Jack Crisp in my eyes. Like, I know De Goey's had a ripping last 6 to 8 weeks, but Crisp is having a career season. He hasn't missed a game since getting to Collingwood in 2015. So he got durability. He's got his career high SuperCoach average. First time he's averaged over the ton, 105. Gone at 103 in DreamTeam and Fantasy. Has been scarily unique across the formats too throughout the year, given all those things, durability, consistency, all that stuff. So for me, it's got to be him. If we were doing it for the past 2 months, of course it's De Goey. But if it's for the season, it's got to be Crispy. Cash cow of the year for me from them, Caleb Poulter. Again, you talk about Owies coming in at a really crucial time. Maybe not so much for on field for Owies, but certainly for cash generation and depth. Poulter became that guy for a 4 to 6 week stretch. You could bank him on field. He gave you a couple of tons, some nice high scores, really advanced that cash generation quickly. And if you moved him on at that buy round of Collingwood, that was the right time to move him on. But he was absolutely brilliant for coaches. And then the track watch, for me, I'm going to sneak 2. One, De Goey. If he starts 2022 the way he ends this year, he's crazy value, because I think he still retains forward status, especially if he retains forward status. And then the other's Nick Dacos. I know keeper leagues, he's probably the first picked off the board in a redraft of a keeper league, not a brand new keeper league. But is he going to get the midfield time to warrant what will likely be having him as, if not the number 1 pick, the number 2 and most expensive rookie next year? For me, that'll be fascinating. Do they play him through the midfield? Do they play him through forward? Is he worth the big outlay we'll have to pay? Because he's going 1 or 2 this year's draft. Whether North choose to get him and put a bid on him, or whether, likely, I think it's the Crows at finishing 17th. They would put a bid. We know they're more than happy to put a bid on a bloke if they see the warrant there. So for me, that'll be the track watch with Nick. What's that role like? Because if he's just playing forward, like his brother did early in his career, that's not worth peak value. Rowell and Walsh have really been the only cows of late to really warrant that high-end selection. So that'll be, for me, is one I'm really keen to see. You want to talk about the Dons for me, man?
Yep, so a familiar face takes out his MVP. Zach Merritt, year in, year out with this guy. He's pretty reliable. He was frustrating on the weekend, I must admit. But this is the body of work, not just how he went for Jordan's team on the weekend. No, another ripping year from him. He's a captain choice. He does it all. So cash cow is Nick Cox. He
was good.
He's going to be a player. He was a little bit dearer than most, but absolutely worth the investment if you started with him. He went on to play, I think, 20 games, nearly every game. So, impressive. And then the 2022 track watch for the Bombers is Jai Caldwell.
Nice.
I think some of us may have forgotten about. He came in with a fair bit of hype and actually scored a ton in his first game.
Yeah.
And then got injured. And we haven't seen him since. Now, we might actually get a look at him this week. He's a chance for selection. But either way, he'll be discounted for only playing the 2 or 3 games. If he's looking fit and raring to go, he's probably just about your first pick in the forward line.
Yeah, especially if he's got that forward status. Gosh, Parrish would have been pretty close too for that MVP. Like you could have built a case for almost either of them, couldn't you?
He's like, we should create a new one, surprise packet of the year. He would have fit right into there.
Yeah, or like trade for the year. Like he was in that article that I mentioned earlier about Patreons. I think maybe, maybe it's because Merritt's done it for the whole year and Parrish has done it for 3 quarters, is probably where I see where you're going with that. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I was just going to say with Parrish, just on that, he hit some monster scores.
Oh, his ceiling was pretty good, yeah.
What hurt him in the MVP count was just on the back end. He would have let some coaches down, especially those that paid up, that thought, this guy's fair income. I'm going to just pay top dollar. And then, there was a couple of 60s, if I'm not mistaken, whereas Merritt just a bit more consistent. But bad luck, Darcy. There's always next year.
There is always next year, my friend. You'll get your chance. Let's talk Fremantle. Look, there's a couple of actual reasonable candidates to consider for MVP, but for me, as good as Darcy's been, and he's been pretty darn good, kind of feel like the totality of the season, got to give it to Andrew Brayshaw. Yep, there's been a couple of tagged out of the game moments, and yep, I think Darcy over the past 10 weeks is averaging 130 in SuperCoach. So he's gone full beast mode. But again, Brayshaw has had 2 or 3 games where he's put his foot wrong all year and that's it. Whereas Darcy, the only time you were looking at him, different in AFL Fantasy where he picked up ruck forward status, was at that Grundy point heading into buys. What was that, round 11? And so Darcy's been great for the back half. But over the season, I've just seen the year of Brayshaw and gone, look, a 107 average in SuperCoach, 104 in Dream Team and Fantasy. If he can get those tags basement scores up to 85s, not 55s, then for me, he's going to be one of the next Uber premiums for a long time.
And this is harsh on Darcy because, like you said, he could easily have taken out that award. But have we ever had a player score so well and yet cause so many grey hairs for coaches? I mean, he got injured. There was a period there where he got injured every week, and you think, I have to trade him now. And then middle of the week, he's all right. And then you spend the weekend worrying he's laid out. He comes out and scores a ton. So.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's some stressful moments, but he's been a really great pick for people. Look, the cash cow again. We didn't get a heap from Freo, but Josh Tracy looked like a bit of a bust for those that picked him as a ruck forward. But then again, through that bye period, that crucial period of getting born bodies on the ground, getting every ounce of cash generation you can get, he really delivered for coaches through that middle portion, through the multi-buy rounds. A really crucial 6 weeks for the year. I think he's going to be a ripping player, not a fantasy option, just because Darcy's got the ruck. Lob's kind of the second guy. Tracy's the key forward. And like any key forward, it's going to need a serious bag to get there. So for me, great as a cash cow, but that's it. And then the 2022 track watch. If you don't have your eyes on Caleb Sarong, uppercut yourself. We saw his ability last year. The anticipation was he'd deliver it this year. Longmuir deliberately has taken what I believe is the right football approach with him, which is teach him the defensive and the hard gut running work of the game by playing accountable and defensive minded football. And then just in the past couple of weeks, Fife's out of that midfield unit. Walters hasn't had a chance to float in there, not much for the year, but certainly since being injured. He's pulled the trigger on him, Longmuir, and let him attack the ball. And he's showing his fantasy chops. For me, he's going to be an absolute screaming option, especially if Adam Chera leaves and that midfield role really opens up. Gosh, if Ches leaves for family reasons, back to Victoria, Caleb Sarong will probably be my first pick next year. That's how hot I am on what he could be next year. Let's talk Giants. Sorry. I
was going to say, you think Fife and Walters, they're just going to be more forward as the years go on.
Yeah, and I think Fife's going to be a forward eligible option for us next year, which in SuperCoach, good news. The others,
very nice.
Let's see the damage we get.
So the Giants
Oh,
MVP.
I'm keen to see what you do here.
Bit of controversy here because the one that we actually nominated, I've actually decided it's a tie. Someone snuck in with
You've gone full
a
Olympic
secret
medal
vote.
and gone for the tie.
Yeah. So Tim Taranto had the MVP in the bag all year.
Yes.
And then through no fault of his own, Leon Cameron, as wise as that man is, decided he's a forward, and he's been a headache. And the one that he shares it with is Josh Kelly because
nice.
Because look, in fantasy was the only comp where he was forward, but he was super consistent. I know the first half of the year he wasn't really hitting any heights.
Yeah, nothing for the first 6 weeks.
Nah, but last week, I mean, he pulled out a 140 in the fantasy prelim world. That's huge. So I think Taranto and Kelly share the MVP.
For those curious, by the way, from round 7, the first 6 weeks, Kelly was averaging 85.5 in fantasy and dream team, 90.8 in SuperCoach. So not great, not horrible. However, since then, he has been on fire, an average of 111 in AFL fantasy and dream team, 112 in SuperCoach. And as you said, has that forward eligibility in AFL fantasy, had 10 consecutive SuperCoach tons in a row from round 7 onwards. So yeah, he's probably in that unlucky place, almost like Parrish to some extent, but you've given the tie and I'll acknowledge it. I'll allow it.
I mean, he's the sort of guy who, around that sort of, as we go past the first, say, third of the season and people are starting to do their first midfield upgrades.
Yeah, he would.
Those who started with Josh Kelly would have been disappointed, but no one else was looking at it.
Yeah.
And then once he hit his tear, it would have been a bit unique. Anyway, cash cow. Oh, remember Matt Flynn? I mean, what a tale. What a story 2021 was for Matt Flynn. Started as everyone's R3, R4, and for some reason we all ended up making him R2. So he was a fascinating part of the first half of 2021. When he played, he was great. And then we all had that nervous wait during the week of his Mumford getting a run.
Oh, that's funny.
It was headache. I'm pretty sure, I haven't checked this, I should go back and check. I am pretty sure in preseason there was all this talk that the new rules were going to impact ruckman and they were going to be scoring less. So that means less likely to spend up on Grundy and Gawn. And so that's why a lot of people went R2 with Flynn. And in round 1, I'm pretty sure Flynn was the highest scoring ruckman in long-term fantasy.
He definitely outscored Grundy and Gawn in a lot of places there, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. So look, that alone and the cash he made. If Mumford had retired, like we all thought he would years ago, Flynn would have played all those games. He would have been making so much cash, but no, he gets it hands down. And in the track watch, in the same vein is Braden Bruce,
it's Bruce season.
It's just going to be R2 for everyone, just like it was at the start of this year. He got injured. So
he made top 10 in the 50 most relevant this year. Like, I'm not going to give away too much about the current list because obviously we need to see trades, prices, positions, all that stuff. But think about it, Super Team. If he made top 10 last year at his current price point, he will get the max discount for not playing at all this year. He just needs to be named round 1. And if he's not the most highly owned player, what are you doing?
And what if he plays this week? Because Liam Cameron might play him just as one final.
Please don't do that.
Coaches.
That feels very Leon Cameron, doesn't it?
And it's going to be Briggs, and it's just a question of whether he shares it with Prusy. So I'd like to see him.
Don't do it.
It's such a great end of the
No, we've already had a couple of cows ruined that I had this eye on going, yep, just keep Braden Cook out. Yep, fantastic. Great. No, okay, go. You're going to ruin a cow for us for next year. Fantastic. That's Leon Cameron's ultimate salute to the 2021 season where he played Haynes on the wing to start the year. He played Kelly off half forward. He's playing Taranto forward. He's playing Cornelio anywhere other than through the midfield. Like, he's become the new coach that we go, I don't have any confidence whatsoever in what you're doing.
No.
But I like
Is it going to get to the point like with Bevo the Bulldogs players.
I think he's overtaken
That's to
Bevo.
avoid.
I think he's overtaken Bevo. Yeah.
I think
'Cause-
Caleb Daniel in the ruck the other week.
Yeah, it probably should have been too. Let's talk about the Cats. For me, the MVP, look, Cam Guthrie's been great, but over the totality of the season, it must be Tom Stewart. Guthrie's been in runs, and for those that own him at the moment, he's in one of those great runs at the moment. But right now, he's averaging a career high AFL Fantasy and DreamTeam average, similar in SuperCoach, a 107. I know some of us might have a bit of a sour taste in our mouth off the back of the injury that has ruined his season. But to be fair, when you get 20 games of durable, consistent, reliable footy in the back line, that's why you brought him in either at the start or at various points during the year to just be the bedrock of your back line. And he's absolutely been that. And so for me, big tick off if you picked off Tom Stewart at some point in the year. From a cash cow perspective, look, Cats didn't give us many. So it's got to be Max Holmes, mid forward, played a handful of games. I don't think many people jumped on him by desire, rather maybe more necessity of the weeks they were like, I just need to get a downgrade that's playing, and that's him. And so I'm going for it. But he's shown some footy wheels about him. You can see now why Geelong gave away this year's first round pick to Richmond for him, because he's got some talent about him, but not been the greatest cow. But he's been Geelong's best cow to go for it. And then 2022 track watch. Look, it's a really hard one because you could say Dangerfield. You could say Guthrie. You could say, if Menegola gets forward status or Stewart again. But for me, I really love Mitch Duncan as a footballer. We know he's a really great, consistent 100-plus guy. He'll be cheaper again due to missing so many more amount of games. He's got some injury impacted scores in his average, plus a discount he will receive. The question will be how much, not if he gets one. So for me, he's a track watch just to keep an eye on him. I'm not super bullish on it, but I think from a Geelong perspective, I'm certainly keen to see what he can be.
Can I throw one in to
Yes.
go with him?
Yes.
Zach Guthrie.
Ooh.
Just keep an eye on him in the off season.
Okay.
I think he's going to be someone
Okay.
to look at.
I like
All
it.
right, Gold Coast Suns.
Oh, this MVP will be hard, mate.
Oh yeah, just going through all their ruckman, mate.
Oh.
Take it. No, the MVP at Gold Coast is going to go close to the league MVP. Let's be honest. I mean, I've never been so surprised by seeing someone have a season like this. And Took Miller, he's always been a solid footy player, a solid fantasy player, pretty good, a draft guy, as we call it. Absolute belter of a season.
Unbelievable.
Super fit, always in the right spot. He would have let a few down on the weekend, but overall, what a season. So, yeah.
Yep,
Easy choice,
great
that
shout.
one. Cash Cow's an easy choice too. I could have put him in the track watch actually. Jeremy Sharp.
Yeah.
I really like him as a guy that you could start with in a second year. He's a second year player, and I just think he's going to keep going. I don't think he's going to stop. He's a great player and some big scores. And yep, I think he's definitely the one that's made the most cash, but probably would have to be close to the highest averaging cow.
Yeah, he'd be pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the track watch for next year is, look, it's the same as last year. The prodigal son, Matty Rao. He's been playing. You might not have realised if you're not watching closely because he's not setting the world on fire. But look, I wouldn't be stressed. If you've got him in a keeper league, I wouldn't be too stressed
Not at all.
about the output. Nah, he's just chipping away, finding his way. I think it's good for him that he's not, performing overly well. He can just play his game, get used to the level again, have a big preseason, and be everyone's first pick next year.
Yeah, he's the best thing he's doing is he just keeps bringing that average down for us, doesn't he? With these games, and all you need to see are just glimmers. You just need to see moments. And that's what we're seeing with Rao. We're not seeing quarters and games like we saw last year. We're seeing glimmers. Let's let this guy get fully fit and healthy and really have a crack at it. I really, really like that call, man. Let's talk Hawthorn. I think it's three really obvious picks here. Tom Mitchell, just been a gun. It just consistently good this year, has barely let you down with a poor score. Maybe doesn't have the crazy ceilings that he's had previously, but he's just been so good for the totality of the year. If you traded into him, especially during the year, it was a move that was really valuable, but he's been solid across the year. So for me, that's that. For cash cow, it's got to be Lockie Bramble. He has stormed home over these past, 6+ weeks now, and has really saved a lot of coaches that have got stung with injuries and not able to get as many premiums on field as they want. Bramble, for the most part, has saved a few coaches, and in AFL Fantasy, where he's a forward, which I never got that. He's clearly a defender, but that's fine. He's been a guy that even just over the past few weeks in AFL Fantasy, if you played him over Lockie Hunter, you're looking at about 80 points better off in the past fortnight alone. And so, yeah, he's been sensational for me, Lockie Bramble. He'll be a defender for us next year. And speaking of defenders, that's where my track watch goes next year. James Sicily, proven premium over a number of years through that back line. Talls coming back from ACLs do have a little bit of a flag for me there, but he'll get maximum discount from not playing this year. It'll be, for me, who are the options available at that top tier, especially our forward lines always factor into how many stepping stone price guys we can go for. But for me, Sicily's a fantastic footballer. He'll take that quarterback role from Hawthorn again once he returns under Sammy Mitchell. And for me, he's definitely on the watch list in 2022.
Absolutely. Throw GF in there as well.
Oh, yeah, I'm keen to see those two boys roll together. That's just a delightful intercepting pair.
Do you have any fears? Because the Hawks backline, they've just got these guys, Howe and GF and Grimshaw. They've got a heap of them. Do you have any fears that the new coach might say, let's have a look at Sicily in the forward line? Yep.
Anytime a new coach comes in, everything's got to be, I need to see, I need to hear, I need to watch. And so that's why Sicily's a watch list, because that's where he started. Now, I think that would be a mistake, because he's shown that he was an okay forward and he's an elite defender. But there's no reason they don't flip GF. There's no reason Scrimshaw doesn't move up to the wings. Anytime a new coach
forwards are coming on.
Yeah.
Forwards are coming on. So
we'll see.
It should be fine. Yep. Melbourne, MVP, they've had some good ones this year. Special mention to Maxi Gawn. Clayton Oliver's had probably not the year we would have hoped, but he's still been fantastic. But Christian Petracca, what a season. What a player. Could be wearing a Brownlow in a few weeks' time, if we're honest. So he's really surprised me. I didn't think he would have the ceiling. I always thought he'd be a superstar and he'd get you to the ton. But his last, probably the whole season, maybe the last 6 weeks predominantly. I know this because I haven't owned him and I've been against him in head-to-head so many times. And I always think Petracca, all right, hopefully he just hits a ton and then he relaxes. But no, he pushes on. He scores over 110, 120, kicks goals, does it all. What a superstar. Cash cow, I mean,
good call.
Probably the cash cow of the year. James Jordan.
Yeah,
another guy with a great name. On field, you're laughing for the first half of the year.
Yeah,
one of those guys, it's like he's maxed out. I don't want to trade him. It's time to upgrade him, but but he still scores so well. So, absolute star of the future. And then for the track watch,
I'm keen to see what we do
maybe
here.
A bit early. Yeah, just Trent Rivers. I've just seen him as someone who.
Actually. Yes.
Yeah, they love him at Melbourne. He's going to be playing, and they're just going to build around him. Him and the two playing that role. I've just been waiting for Rivers to hit a score. Just
You
see
want
a
to
score
see it
from him. And I think on the weekend he hit an 86, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
But interestingly, he will be heading into his third year, so could be a real shout for a third year breakout. But keep an eye on him in the off season.
Yeah, I think it's a ripping shout. And for me, in keeper leagues, like he's that kind of guy that's going to go under the radar for a lot of people unless he gets some preseason hype in the classic formats and salary cap game. So for me, yeah, I really, really like that call. Let's go to North Melbourne again. This is a real easy one. Zeebel's been great, but it is Aaron Hall every day of the week. Now, if you had a timeline of like Zeeble to like round 7 and then Hall, perfect combination. But over the whole season, which of those two has defined your ultimate seasonal rank? Hall's had a bigger input, in my opinion, than Zeeble has. Like, for example, since round 7, he scored 12 fantasy and dream team tons, 9 of them over 120. In this run, his lowest score has been 88. It's not bad for a lowest score. And he's averaged 118.9 in that 15-game run. SuperCoach, over that same stretch of games, 14 tons, 5 over 120. His only score under 100 has been 73, and he's averaged 121 in that stretch. Safe to say, he's the maker of the year. He is where the heck did that come from? More than Parrish, not because he's lacked the pedigree, but everyone was waiting for the injury, and it just has never come. He's been absolutely sensational.
And, yeah, just to jump in, Aaron Hall, like, what a story. Do you remember back at Gold Coast, he had that record where he had 9 votes in the Brownlow at the end of round 3?
Yeah.
And killing it, obviously, in Dream Team. And then just what happened? He just sort of faded, injuries, left the club, went to North, couldn't get going. This was like his last chance. And what an absolute superstar he's been for us in the fantasy world. And he's just signed, I think, a 2-year contract at North. And he's pretty, I think. So it's a great story. I'm happy for him. And I finally got him in the weekend.
Hey, mate,
Anyway.
better late than never. The interesting thing will be, are people prepared to pay top dollar for him in the back line next year? That'll be a discussion that we will save heading into the 2022 preseason. The cash cow, they've given us a couple, but the best is definitely Tom Powell in my eyes. He even picked up forward status in AFL Fantasy this year from round 4 to round 7, which is a crucial period for when we still have so many cows on the ground and we need them to perform and to not just generate cash. Here's what Tom Powell did in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team: 91, 73, 102, 104. In Supercoach, 101, 74, 96, 97. Was scoring comparable to some of our premiums through there. His points on field just through that period of time and the cash he generated was super critical for coaches. He was one of the most highly owned cows for a reason. He's, in my eyes, if not the best, one of the 2 best fantasy prospects that came out of the draft from last year to be able to own. So certainly from a keeper league, he's one you want to be able to sink your teeth into. And then you track watch in 2022. I'm going to caveat with, I want to see this person retain a position. And if they retain the position, they're very much in the Degoe territory of, they've had a sensational run home, and the ceiling they'd have to get to as a forward doesn't have to be as high as if they were a mid only. And that's Taron Thomas. He's found his home. He's impacting the scoreboard, damaging inside forward 50. Really classy and courageous midfielder. And those two kind of skill sets don't often mix together, but Taron has that. You can see why they rate him so highly internally. He adds a different dimension to the kind of the one-paced bulls they have with the Cunningtons, the Powells, the Phillips of the world. Even Anderson, offers something. But for me, if Taron retains forward status, which I think he does, he, along with Degoe, will be one of those forwards that we'll look at and just go, if he goes full midfield, this will be one of the easiest picks we make of the year. He also has the opportunity of going full De Goey this year and being a frustration piece at the start of the year. But no, look, I think Taron Thomas is a ripping one to keep an eye on heading into next year. Let's talk Port Adelaide. Who have you got for me, man? This is an interesting one.
Yeah, MVP is a guy that surprised me. I didn't think he had this sort of year in him. I thought he was a solid ton guy, but Ollie Wines, he's gone to another level. Credit to him. I was just looking earlier. He's averaging 111 in DreamTeam and fantasy.
Wow.
And his best average before this year was 5 years ago when he averaged just under 101. So he's had a career best average. He's actually added 10 points to his best ever average.
Uncontested stuff, isn't it? Like Took, it's the uncontested, the outside stuff that he's added.
Yeah, there's a bit of a trend this year. So, yep, good on you. That's good for Ollie Wines. And then Cash Cow. They're pretty good with their cash cows, Port, generally, and Miles Bergman was no exception. He's had a fantastic year.
I like that.
He's only missed, I think, 2 or 3 games, and that's in a side that's, pushing to top 4 all year. Very impressive. Would have made you cash, would have been great to have on the field, loopholes, you name it. And then track watches too, and I just couldn't split them because I just see them very similar. So Dan Houston and Zach Butters.
Yeah,
and
nice.
Just quickly on Houston, he played throughout the season, but I think we could all see whether it was his shoulder or he's had a couple of things hurt him. So his average is nowhere near what it could be, and I just think if he can have some clean outs over the off season, get his body completely ready to go. I think he'll be really underpriced. And then same with Zach Butters.
Yeah.
He'll keep. Do you think he'll keep forward status?
He will.
Enough games to lose it. He's a little jet as well. Great to watch. And just didn't get the run that we thought with the injuries that came. And then even when he came back, he was looking good and then he was off again. So 2 guys who, if they get through the off season and they're looking fit, hugely underpriced.
Yeah, I think that's a good call, man. You could probably throw Rosie into that mix too if you wanted to, or Dersma, or like that. They got a couple of decent kids. That is for sure. Let's talk about Richmond. The MVP for me, it's Jaden Short. He's been the premium that for the most part this year has consistently delivered. The lack of Hooley in a couple of games has made a difference. If you want to look at some of the splits of when he plays with and without Hooley, it certainly aids him in terms of that. But he's just been so good this year. And for owners, he's been more highly owned. Like he's the kind of guy when you look at the ownership, you're like, oh, wow, 20%, 25%. Wow. Like I didn't realize he was that high. A couple of formats, but he's been that good and delivered for the most part on expectations for coaches. So for me, he's the MVP. The cash cow, Riley Collier-Dawkins is definitely the one. Again, Richmond having given us heaps that we've felt comfortable with. And much like Poulter, it was in that middle trimester of the year where a lot of injuries hit and he became really important, not just because of the cash he freed up as a downgrade, but then he was somebody because he got midfield opportunity, centre bounce opportunity. Richmond were still being Richmond at this point in time, missing soldiers, but still banking wins. He was really, really important to us, sort of round 6 to 8 to the bye round. That sort of 6-week stretch, he was really important for owners this year. So well done, Riley. You picked that up. And then your track watch next year. Look, Richmond fascinate me in the off season. They really fascinate me. You can have 2 schools of thought with Richmond. The popular narrative, and to be fair, I think it's the justified. They can write it off as a bad year and they'll go again, bigger than ever. But I did listen to Jack Rewalt the other night, and he talked about why hasn't this past 10 weeks worked? That famous AFL 360 where he says, good luck, anyone that plays us. And that's the confidence that he and the team have rightly had, given what they've done. But the reasons he gave was, well, we battled injuries. Sure. But Richmond have battled that previous years too. Oh, it's been long seasons. Yeah, they have. But there've been other teams that have been within a week or two playing the same amount of times. We spent a lot of time away from home. Yeah, you did last year, but you could argue now that Sydney and GWS probably should belong to that title. The hunger wasn't there. Okay. Why will it be back next year if it's not there now? So do they fall off the cliff like the Crows after 20? Like everyone thought the Crows would fire in 2019. Injury ruined 2018. Cool. We'll call it an aberration. And then the old blokes it didn't work. Now, do I think that happens to Richmond? I don't think so. But the narrative is all, they'll just bounce back. They'll just bounce back. I'm like, well, yeah, they probably will. But have we considered the possibility that they don't? So that's why I say that before I talk about this player. For me, it's going, man, I'm so fascinated to see what Richmond do. They've lost a lot of key off-field personnel over the years, much like other premiership dynasty teams, for sake of a better phrase, have had. And so all that being said, Dusty was great for the first month and then did not much for the rest of the year, whether that be carrying an injury, form, hunger, any of the reasons. For me, if the fire's in the belly for Dusty next year, he's had extra time off, albeit it'll be a unique off season, still managing that pretty serious injury. If the hunger's there for Dusty, he's probably the only Tiger I want to have a look at next year at this point in time. That's my thoughts. What do you got for me for the Saints?
I was just going to say, with Dusty, put Shea Bolton in that category.
Yeah, he belongs there too.
He's going to be better next year.
Yeah.
St Kilda. Oh, I'm glad I got St Kilda. I get to talk.
I feel like I'm giving you easy ones. What is it?
The MVP, my favourite non-Crow, Jack Steele.
He's a gun.
Doesn't take much explanation really for this one. I'd put him as the MVP of the whole league in fantasy talk. Could be a sneaky for the Brownlow. I don't know if they've won enough games. Anyway, he's current total points leader in fantasy dream team and the only player capable of taking that title in SuperCoach from Jackson McRae. He's just a guy who earlier in his career would get his fantasy scores by tackling. And if he ever became an accumulator as well, this was always going to happen, and it's just been great to watch. Cash Cow was a guy that was pretty frustrating, more that they weren't playing him. Tom Highmore, they just didn't pick him.
True.
So much in that early part. And every week there was a like-for-like player that would get injured. Here we go. Highmore will come in, and he didn't. But when he did, he was pretty good, and he made cash for those that were patient and waited. And then 2022 Track Watch, there's a few at St Kilda. I'll keep it quick. Billings is one who I think could end up at another club. He's a much better scorer than what he's done this year. Yeah. And then another one is Brad Crouch, who I just think he had a bit of that was his first year at St Kilda. There was a lot of pressure on him. There was a lot, residual stuff from his exit with the Crows. Only averaging 94 in Dream Team. He's much better than that, so he'll be under price. But the main one to keep an eye on is Owen Marshall.
Yeah, good shot.
Hasn't he been fantastic since he come back? Look, he's probably in that category of injury prone now, unfortunately.
Yep.
He's just had a couple of niggles. It doesn't matter if Paddy Ryder's there or not, whether he continues. I'm not sure where he's at in his career, if he's looking at retiring or I'm not sure. But either way, Marshall will score fine. And he should have forward and ruck dual position, which is going to be handy as well. So keep an eye on him. I don't think you need to see much, just other than he's fit and his body's looking good, and he'll be very popular.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good call, man. Let's talk about one of our last three clubs before we wrap up this episode. Sydney, who's their MVP? Callum freaking Mills. I know the past month has been frustrating for coaches with a couple of different reasons. But had he not missed games through injury and COVID protocol, he would rightly have the total points number one defender for the year across the formats. He would have taken Rory Laird out of that spot. But he's been sensational for coaches. And he's a great reminder for people of the narrative was there. And not enough of us went there. The narrative was what? We're going to play Mills through the midfield. We're going to play Mills through the midfield. We need him through the midfield. Now, the hesitancy was, you've said that before, Horse. And we know that all it takes is one injury in the back line and then you move him back. But they haven't. Not because of a lack of injuries, but because of they've desperately needed to make that move to regenerate that midfield unit. And he's the new leader of the pack through there, especially once Kennedy starts to phase out over these next few moments. So he's been brilliant. And you're not going to argue me anyone else other than Callum Mills. Cash cow of the year. This is all I'll say about this player's first 3 games of the season, and I don't need to say much else. 108, 93, 98 in Dream Team and Fantasy, 139, 136, 74 in SuperCoach. Errol Goulden. Amazing start to the year. Really kickstarted that cash generation really fast and advanced. Playing as a small forward, you're going to see some deviation, but he just flew out of the box, the absolute blocks for us as a cash cow. He was sensational. Was gone after round 8. Had a couple of down games, but by then he delivered and done everything we needed. And then heading into 2022, who's on the track watch list? Look, you could say a couple, but I really do like what I'm seeing from Nick Blakey in this halfback role. I really do like it. I like James Rowbottom as a midfielder. I like McInerney as a midfielder, but Blakely, again, the ceiling of what he'd have to be as a stepping stone. He doesn't need to be a 95, 105 guy to make it work like as a midfielder. He just needs to go 80s. Low 80s for it to really fly and work and make 20 points per game up. So he'll miss at least, I would think probably the rest of the year with that injury, but definitely is missing this weekend. But he'll pick up defensive eligibility based off his role, and he's definitely someone I'm pretty keen to keep an eye on. All right, your last club, mate. You got the doggies for me. Who are you giving it to?
The doggies, MVP, pretty impressive actually. Jack Macrae. It feels like a long time ago because he had a run of those high 90s. That was not what we wanted, but he was the last man standing in the run of tons, if you like, in Dream Team Fantasy. He scored, 9, 10 tons in a row to start the year before
Something crazy.
Finally faltered. Yeah, he's been doing it for years now, and no surprises there. But what's been impressive about him taking out the Bulldogs MVP is that Josh Dunkley was on the rise. Adam Treloar joined. He's got some competition. Bontempelli had some year. He came very close. But no, Macrae takes out the MVP. Cash cow, such a humble scorer. Anthony Scott, never really went beyond 40 or 50, but he was just always there when you needed him. And he was chipping away at his cash generation. And no, he was a handy one. Cody Waitman deserves a mention. A much flashier player and much more easy to notice. When you're watching and the kids are playing your cash cows, it takes a few games for you to know what number they are and recognise them, so that you can cheer on every kick. Waitman was very easily detectable because he was a flashy player. And then the 2022 track watch, Josh Dunkley. A season of 2 halves. We can't be too hard on him, but started the year all guns blazing and was going toe-to-toe with Macrae in that ton run.
Yeah.
He was scoring nothing but tons, and then, copped that serious shoulder. It was a shoulder up. Yep. Missed a huge chunk, and I didn't think we'd see him in fantasy. I thought maybe he'd come back for the Bulldogs finals campaign. So credit to him that he's come back, but for those that were waiting with bated breath for his return, it's been pretty miserly, 50s and 40s and 60s. So that'll bring his price down for us next year.
Yeah, plus the discount. Yeah.
And the discount. You'd think he gets through the off-season fine. He'd be a pretty popular pick round one. Question, though, will he keep forward status?
Ooh.
Could be line ball.
I think he's line ball, but he's not getting crazy midfield opportunities at the moment. I think it's line ball.
Come back.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so.
I reckon he will.
I know, Kane and I were really bullish on him all pre-season and we're pretty happy to see him fly out of the gate. But I think that Bulldog midfield, they're still trying to find their feet, aren't they? And that's what's kind of hurting them at the moment is with Dunkley out for lots of the year, Treloar out for chunks of the year. They've not had time to find their combinations and their mix right. So they'll want to get that sorted pretty quick, given they are 9 to 10 days away from a likely qualifying final as their destination. So they'll want to sort that out. I like that Dunkley call, man. Let's see the positives of the bad scores now, the value that he's embedding in for us. All right, for the last one, I reckon West Coast was probably the hardest team that I got to give an MVP to, because Gaff's been underwhelming. Yo's only played half a season. Nick Nat's probably been good to more than, not quite great, but better than good in SuperCoach, but not relevant in Dream Team and Fantasy for us. No real forwards. Duggan was, for the most part,
yeah, he was hot early.
He was okay, but let's call him a bust.
Yeah,
because he only gave us 1 or 2 really big scores. Even though he missed a chunk of time with a hamstring injury, and one of the games was drastically injury affected, and he's still not playing now. If you owned Shannon Hearn from round 10 to round 20, his lowest score in that stretch was a 77 in Dream Team and Fantasy. Then the next lowest, he had 2 70s, and the next lowest was 90. He had 2 scores under 90 again in that same stretch of games in SuperCoach, and he was stupidly cheap. And so it's not a compelling victory that I award the MVP to Shannon Hearn. But he gets it as like the Bradbury of fantasy options for West Coast.
Sure. I think it's clear cut. I think he was fantastic.
He was good. He was good for owners up until a couple of injury impacted games. From a Cows perspective, son of Tyson, Luke Edwards for me gets that. Or Connor West has been handy late. But yeah, Luke Edwards had a couple of really nice performances again, similar to a Collier Dawkins. It was probably more that he gave you a green dot on the bench that enabled you to action an upgrade around him. But he's been someone that when he's played, he's shown that he's got some fantasy chops. And then who's a guy on the watch list for 2022? Look, you could say it's the underpriced Yo. You could say it's the underpriced Gaff. That could they come back and be back to their best? But
Kelly, Luke Kelly,
their entire midfield unit. But for me, I'm really keen on what does Alex Witherden become in this back six. Rids, I know in the preseason was really hot on. If he gets into the best 22, he's a premium. And he showed for the most part, he's still got that ability. Even last week, he showed, premium territory scoring. So I want to see what West Coast do. Do they go load the dice on this list one last go? Or do they start to think about the future? I don't know. But if Witherden can crack that 22, we know his fantasy chops are absolutely there. All right, that's our thoughts.
It's a great one. Great one to finish on, because if you ask me the track watch player out of all the clubs, I would have said Alex Witherden.
Yeah.
And I think the issue was, is he going to be their best 22? There's 2 things with Witherden that make me pretty excited for next year. One is they brought him across from Brisbane. He'd been on okay money. They brought him across to be the successor of Shannon Hearn. They probably didn't think Shannon Hearn was going to be this good still. So,
yeah.
But in saying that, he's been in and out of the side. what I saw on the weekend in the derby, I know they lost, but he looked like, I'm talking really good.
He did look
footy
good.
level, not just fantasy. He was smothering. He was desperate. That's the stuff they're going to want to see. And if he does that, he plays. And if he plays, he scores.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. A sneaky last and only question for the podcast we'll be able to get in, because it's a long episode for our final one. Chris Williams wants to know, in AFL Fantasy, a good Patreon supporter of the panel. Make sure you do stick through the off season with us Patreons. Like I said, there'll be articles for every player that moves during the trade and free agency period. I'll do a podcast with some of the panel reviewing that. And Kane and I are also working on our top 50 keeper ranks that only Patreons will get. You'll get that. You'll get a full list of the positions once they're officially released. We'll make sure you get them so you don't have to pay for any of the assistant coach featurettes type of things. We'll give you that full list and a bunch of other stuff before December 31. We kick off the 50 most relevant early for Patreons. Yep. The reason we mention him, Chris is a Patreon. Here's his question. I've got a thought. I'll read it out to you so you can buy us some time, Jordox. He's ranked 30th in AFL Fantasy. I see you there, Chris. I see you nice and close, mate. I'm with you, brother. He's in a serious cash league grand final. Last decision. Here are his 4 options. Which one do you like the most? Of course, teams could destroy any of these plans for Chris or any of us. Option 1, Harms to Crisp. Or option 2, Walsh to Parrish and Harms to Rich. Option 3, Walsh, Taranto to Miller Kelly. Or Sidey to Kelly. A lot of variables could happen through there. What do you like the look of those 4, man?
With number 3, just to clarify, Walsh, Taranto, is that Walsh or Taranto to Miller or Kelly? Or
I would.
Walsh
That's how I'm
Taranto
reading it.
Miller?
Yes, let's go with that.
Okay. Oh, geez, I'm nervous. This is a big decision. Look, I'll just go with what my first instinct is, and that's option 1, get Harms to Crisp. That's where I've landed.
Yeah, that was where my initial one went. The thing with the Taranto would be the next piece of the puzzle for me. Harms would be, what are the ins of Melbourne? Who comes in? And if he's in, well, okay, well that there's the one. He's the guy that'll go to the 40 or 50.
Playing Geelong.
It's a tough matchup. So, but Taranto, if he didn't kick 4 goals too in AFL Fantasy to get a 90 score, 4 goals too. Now he might be unique for you in a matchup. If cash league is your focus, I know if you're in the top 30, mate, he's really highly owned in AFL Fantasy. A lot of coaches I know that are in that territory, in which I am, are just going, you know what? It's not hurting me having him because everyone else has him. That could be a popular mindset. And you could maybe make up some serious points if you can get a Taranto up to a safe 100 guy. So, yeah, man, for me, teams decide it, Chris. And then send us a message. That's the beauty of what you get as a Patreon. You can send us a message and we'll help you off the back of that.
So Taranto, it's such a hard call with Taranto. So a couple of things with him. Toby Green returns.
Yes, that helps.
And then
Daniels is out, so that's good.
Yeah. And yes, he kicked 4 goals to get to his 90 last week. But they're coming up against Carlton on Friday night.
Oh.
They've got a bit to play for, the Giants. You know, if
Saturday
things get
night.
ugly, like it did. Saturday night.
It's a
If
night
things
time.
get ugly, like it did for Carlton against Port last week,
It'll be a
I don't
feast.
know. I get nervous at trading someone like that out. Same with Walsh. I know DeVoe is there, and but I just think of the 4 options. Harms to Crisp is probably the safest one, but
Especially like you said, if Vine is in. Yeah.
And then the other one on side bottom. Sorry, just quickly, the matchup against Essendon.
Yeah.
So to move side bottom on, his highest score of the year in fantasy was a 130, and that was Anzac Day when everyone went nuts. So we're expecting high scores in that game. Yeah, I reckon side bottom could have a good one. But good luck. I don't envy those choices. I'm
mate,
sure you'll nail it though, mate. If
Yeah.
you're 30th ranked,
you're doing all right,
you're
Chris.
probably going to nail it.
You're doing all right. Hey, Jordox, appreciate your work, not just on this episode, mate, but right across the back end of this fantasy. In fact, the entirety of the fantasy footy year. Not a bad debut cash cow season from you as a part of the coaches panel, mate.
Thanks, MJ. Thanks for having me, mate. It's been an awesome year. It's been good fun.
A big thanks to all the team here at the coaches panel. While I know you often hear my voice or face more often than some of the others, there is an absolute power team behind the scenes making it work. So a massive thanks to Kane, to Brett, to Jimmy, to Tim, to Ben, Louis, Fox, Rids, John, Jordox, who is on here with me now. Just some incredible lads that get to be a part of this, doing a ground power work of research, managing and working the social stuff, articles throughout the season, jumping on podcasts, if and when life and lockdowns can allow them to do so. Just an incredible bunch of people throughout the preseason. We've had so many through the fantasy footy community. I'm not going to start listing names because I know I'll forget half the people, but some incredible collaborations across the fantasy footy community through things like the 50 most relevant. But ultimately, the biggest thank you of all goes to you for every single week checking out coachespanel.tv, for jumping on board, downloading, streaming, listening to these podcasts. We hope that they have been helpful to you in your 2021 fantasy footy season. And with just 9 games left to go, we wish you all the luck. We hope your captaincy and vice captaincy calls absolutely fly. Those 50-50 decisions you're making this week, absolutely nail it. And from me and from all of us here at the coaches panel, we definitely will chat to you soon as we talk fantasy footy heading into 2022.